Have you ever felt something was wrong in a relationship but couldn't quite put your finger on it? There's no yelling, no physical violence, no obvious betrayal, but you leave each interaction feeling drained, confused, guilty for things you don't even know you did. You question your own sanity, wonder if you're overreacting, if maybe the problem really is you. Here's the brutal truth: if you're constantly doubting your own perception of reality, it's probably not you. You're being manipulated in such a subtle and sophisticated way that your brain can't identify them. Attack because it doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like concern. It feels like care. It feels like love. Effective manipulation isn't obvious. It's not the movie villain announcing their malicious intentions. It's someone who has learned to hack your empathy, your guilt, your need to be a good person, and use it all as a tool of control. They don't chain you, they bind you with emotional obligation. They don't hurt you with punches, they hurt you by making you believe you deserve to be mistreated. And the scariest thing? The longer you're exposed to these tactics, the harder it becomes to recognize that you're being manipulated, because your perception has been slowly reprogrammed to accept the unacceptable as normal. In the next few minutes, you'll learn the exact 5 signs of manipulation that most people fail to identify until it's too late. It's not about demonizing people. It's about giving you the tools to recognize when someone is playing with your mind. Because once you see the patterns, you can't unsee them. And that clarity, however uncomfortable it may be, is the only thing that will free you from toxic dynamics that are draining your energy, peace, and sanity without you even realizing it. There's someone in your life who's always suffering, always has a tragic story, always a victim of circumstance, and every time you try to walk away, set boundaries, or disagree, a new crisis magically appears and pulls you back in. It's no coincidence. Playing the victim is one of the most sophisticated and invisible manipulation tactics out there because it directly hacks your empathy. Your brain is programmed to help those in pain. It's a basic social instinct. Experienced manipulators know this and use performative vulnerability as a weapon. They're not asking for help. They're trapping you in a dynamic where you feel eternally responsible for their emotional well-being. The difference between someone genuinely vulnerable and someone manipulating through victimization lies in the pattern. People who are truly struggling accept help, show progress, and eventually improve. Chronic manipulators never improve because crisis is their tool of control. Every time you try to distance yourself, the drama escalates. Every time you set a boundary, an emotional emergency arises that makes you feel guilty for abandoning someone who needs you. And here's the psychological trick: the more you help, the more dependent they become, and the more power they have over you. You become an emotional hostage to someone who has learned that performing suffering is the currency of control. The test is simple but brutal. Observe what happens when you say no. If the person accepts your limits maturely, they were genuine. If they immediately intensify the suffering, create a new crisis, or make you feel like an insensitive monster, you're being manipulated. Chronic victimization isn't fragility, it's strategy. It's you being trained to prioritize someone else's emotional needs above your own, indefinitely, without reciprocity. And the worst part, you're probably doing this thinking you're being a good person. You're not, you're being used. You make a decision that's good for you, but someone makes you feel like you've committed a crime. After everything I've done for you, I would never do that to you. You've always been selfish anyway. These phrases aren't innocent observations. They're emotional missiles calibrated to trigger your guilt, and they work because guilt is one of the most paralyzing emotions. It makes you question perfectly reasonable decisions, forces you to justify choices that don't owe anyone a justification, and most importantly, keeps you trapped in a dynamic where you're always in debt. Manipulators know exactly how to strategically deploy guilt to reverse any situation where they're losing control over you. The anatomy of an effective guilt trip has 3 components. First, rehashing past sacrifices as if they were investments demanding eternal returns. "I've always been there for you" isn't gratitude, it's a disguised charge. Second, comparing your behavior to an impossible standard they themselves never met. "I would never abandon you like that," while ignoring the 50 times they did exactly that. Third, Attacking your sense of moral identity. "You're not the person I knew anymore" translates to "you're slipping out of my control, and it bothers me." Each phrase is designed to make you feel unfair, cruel, ungrateful, even when all you're doing is protecting your own mental health. Here's how you identify it. Genuine guilt comes from within, when you've actually wronged someone unfairly. Manipulated guilt comes from without, when you're simply defending your own legitimate interests. If you feel guilty for saying no, for setting boundaries, for prioritizing your time, for disagreeing, for having your own needs, you're not being selfish, you're being conditioned. Manipulators use guilt as an emotional leash. Every time you try to walk away, they yank on the leash and you come back, thinking the problem is with you. It's not. The problem lies with someone who has learned they can control your decisions by making you feel like a horrible person for having autonomy. You do something that bothers someone, but instead of telling you directly, they start acting strange, short, curt answers, heavy silences, dramatic sighs, that icy tone of voice. You ask, "Is everything okay?" and get an "everything's great" that clearly means the opposite. Now you're trapped in a psychological game where you have to guess what you did wrong, apologize for something you don't know what it is, and prove you care by chasing after someone who is deliberately distancing themselves. This isn't poor communication, it's refined manipulation. Passive-aggressive behavior forces you to do the emotional labor that should be the other person's, while they maintain the moral high ground of having done nothing. The perverse genius of passive-aggressiveness is that it automatically puts you on the defensive, without the manipulator having to expose themselves. If they directly said, "I'm upset because you did X," you could respond, explain, resolve the issue. But when they merely insinuate, create an atmosphere of disapproval, and deny there's a problem, you're in an impossible position. Any attempt to resolve the issue is met with, "You're overreacting, nothing's wrong." But the iciness continues, the indirectness continues, the silent punishment continues, and you begin to modify your behavior, trying to appease someone who will never admit they're upset, creating a pattern where you're constantly walking on eggshells, without knowing exactly why. The pattern is always the same: hostility disguised as indifference, anger masked as "I'm fine," emotional punishment without direct confrontation. "I don't care" when you clearly do. Do whatever you want said in a tone that makes it clear there will be consequences. It's all right, followed by days of cold treatment. If you're constantly trying to decipher moods, guess what caused the emotional temperature change? Or preemptively apologizing without knowing why, you're not in a healthy relationship. You're being trained like a lab rat to avoid behaviors that displease someone, who will never directly tell you what displeases them. It's control through ambiguity. And it works perfectly because you do all the manipulation yourself. Someone mistreats you, crosses your boundaries, deliberately hurts you. You confront them, and instead of a genuine apology, you receive an encyclopedia of justifications. "I only did it because you provoked me. I was stressed. You know how I get. If you hadn't done X, I wouldn't have reacted that way." Suddenly, the conversation that should have been about their abusive behavior has turned into what you did to cause it, and you leave the conversation confused, questioning if it was really your fault, if you're being overly sensitive, if perhaps you deserve to be treated that way. This isn't an explanation. It's a reversal of responsibility. It's the manipulator transforming abuse into a logical consequence of their actions. Rationalizing abusive behavior has a predictable structure. First, downplay the severity. "It wasn't that bad. You're exaggerating." Second, externalize the blame. "Anyone in my shoes would have done the same." Third, reverse victim and aggressor. "Actually, the one being abusive here is you for not understanding me." And the final blow: "If you really cared about me, you would understand why I acted this way." Each sentence is designed to make you doubt your own perception of reality. You know you were mistreated, but somehow end the conversation apologizing for causing the situation that justified the mistreatment. It's a perfect psychological loop where the abuser never has to take real responsibility. Here's the truth you need to tattoo on your mind: there's no valid justification for abuse. Zero. None. Stress doesn't justify yelling. Frustration doesn't justify humiliation. Your behavior doesn't justify someone else's destructive behavior. mature. Healthy people take responsibility for their own actions, even when they're upset, even when provoked, even when under pressure. If every time someone hurts you, you hear a list of reasons why it was inevitable, logical, or your fault, you're not dealing with someone who makes occasional mistakes. You're dealing with someone who has learned they can keep hurting you indefinitely, as long as they have a good enough history to erase their responsibility. And as long as you accept these rationalizations, the cycle will never stop. You finally react to the constant abuse, set a firm boundary, or walk away. And suddenly you discover that there's a completely distorted version of the story circulating. In this version, you're the villain. You're the crazy one, the unstable one, the problematic one. The person who manipulated you for months or years is now telling everyone how difficult you are, how you blew up out of nowhere, how ungrateful you are after everything they've done for you. And the worst part, people are believing it, because skilled manipulators don't simply lie. They create coherent narratives that paint you as the abuser and themselves as the innocent victim. It's the ultimate inversion. They abuse you and then publicly blame you for reacting to the abuse. The construction of these false narratives is strategic and meticulous. First, they omit all incriminating context. They never mention the months of provocation, the repeatedly violated boundaries, the subtle manipulations. They only show your final reaction, isolated, out of context, as if you had attacked an innocent person for no reason. Second, they distort your words and actions. Something you said in self-defense becomes unprovoked verbal assault. You're walking away to protect your mental health becomes cruel and selfish abandonment. Third, they recruit witnesses who only saw fragments of the dynamic and use these people to validate the false narrative. And you become paralyzed because defending yourself sounds like you're proving exactly what they're saying, that you're unstable, defensive, and problematic. The brutal truth is that you'll probably never be able to completely correct the false narrative. Manipulators get there first, speak loudest, and control the story. People who haven't lived through the full dynamic will believe the most traumatic version. But here's the thing, those who truly know you, who have witnessed the real pattern over time, will recognize the manipulation, and those who don't, they were never your true allies. Focusing on correcting the narrative keeps you trapped in the manipulator's orbit, still reacting, still defending yourself, still giving energy. The only winning move is to completely withdraw from the game. Accept that some people will believe the lie and build your life away from this type of person. Your peace is worth more than your reputation in the minds of those who chose to believe lies. Now you have the 5 signs that most people take years to identify, if they ever do. Chronic victimization to gain control, strategic guilt trips, passive-aggressive behavior that keeps you guessing, rationalizing abuse as if it were a logical consequence, and false narratives that turn you into the villain. These aren't accidental tactics. They're refined behavioral patterns that manipulators use because they work. And they work because they exploit exactly what makes you human: your empathy, your desire for fairness, your willingness to give second chances. The difference between remaining trapped in these dynamics and finally breaking free lies and recognizing these patterns before they consume you completely. So answer me honestly, how many of these signs have you recognized in someone in your life right now? And more importantly, what will you do with this information? Because knowledge without action is just intellectual discomfort. You can continue to justify someone's toxic behavior by saying they mean no harm, that they're just hurt, that you can help them change. Or you can accept the uncomfortable truth. Systematically manipulative people don't change because you're patient. They change when they lose access to you. Your compassion isn't infinite, and it shouldn't be. Protecting your own sanity doesn't make you cruel. It makes you smart. Every day you spend accepting these tactics, you're teaching someone who might continue using you. If this content is opened your eyes to patterns you are normalizing, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here you'll learn to recognize manipulation, protect your energy, and master your own social dynamics. Remember, you don't need to prove to anyone that you're being manipulated. You just need to stop accepting it. The way out begins when you finally believe in your own perception of reality.